This video is based on UL, Underwriter Laboratories, 2272 for safety of personal e-mobility devices. We have some special guests here. First off, we have General Counsel for Amazon, David Zaplowski, and we have Laura Kavanaugh, Fire Commissioner for New York City. Both of them probably do not know what accreditation is, what certification is, but I am going to teach them today. My name is Daryl Guberman. I am the CEO of Guberman PMC LLC, a quality consulting firm here in Connecticut. We've been open for 12 years, assisting companies in manufacturing quality and also ISO certification and all derivatives. Our background is aerospace, medical materials and the medical implants, printing and plastic distribution, where we dealt with just about every industry. In this article that came out, in this video, the name of it, the title is FDNY, or New York Fire Commissioner, Amazon stops selling unsafe lithium batteries, QA expert Daryl Guberman-Educates, and I shall educate you. And ladies and gentlemen of New York, please listen to this and listen closely. It's going to be a long video, but in order for you to find out that what she's saying about laboratories, accredited labs, is a bunch of bullshit, we're going to continue on. But this is an excerpt from the article. Unless the electrical system and batteries for the device have been certified by an accredited testing laboratory for compliance with UL listing. Well, what they're saying are underwriters, underwriter laboratories. You're going to find out in here how Underwriter Laboratories sits on the American National Standards Institute, right over by Amazon, who they're chastising. These two are, the fire commissioner's chastising because there's been a lot of fires. Probably people are overcharging the batteries and everything else. Most people don't follow directions. I have to confess. I'm one of those people too. So we're all this, in that avenue. You take the thing out of the box and you say, I know how this works. So let's continue on. This is going to be a very long video, but it's going to be very informative to the commissioner, fire commissioner, and also to the general counsel. And by the way, general counsel, I got a letter from an attorney about, I'd say 2 years ago when I was involved with a federal court case. I won, of course. I won. But nevertheless, the attorney that was handling my business, because you couldn't represent it on your own, he stated this in a letter. And I have that letter, Mr. Zaplowski. He said that both state and federal courts are no more than smoke and mirrors. Ms. Kavanaugh, what does that mean to you? That means it's a circus. Let's continue on. There it is. ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, is a private, not-for-profit, non-governmental corporation that has both federal agencies and corporations on board. In 2013, I gave a speech at the American Society for Quality, where there was a gentleman, David Levy, who was a Region 3 director. At that time in 2013, you had the American Society for Quality, that sat on ANSI, of course, and you had ANSI, the American National Standards Institute. They own the American National Credit Board 50/50. Well, Mr. David Levy basically said, we have no problem with you. In fact, ANAB supports you, and we didn't want to get involved. We believed in independence because these guys have no competition. They're so far up the ass of the government, or shall I say it's vice versa. It's a disgusting display that you're going to see. You're going to see that under the banner of ANSI-ANAB certificates, you have companies that are fudging documentation, like Boeing. You have companies that are skipping quality processes and standards, like Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson. And then after 801 ships that have been built, F-35s by Lockheed, they still have rejections, up to including loss of pilot and loss of aircraft. And the sad part is, those organizations all sit by the federal agencies that investigate them after and all the rest of that mess. In 2016, Mr. Randy Doherty invited us to join either ANAB or IAF. But at that time, I felt it was not a prudent thing because in 2015, he had already handed over the International Accreditation Form incorporated in Delaware, which is a repository for national and international accreditation bodies that sit there on the IAF. You will also find out that ANSI-ANAB are underwriters for the IAF and also ILAC. Remember, the IAF is incorporated in Delaware, and you have ILAC, the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation, which is in Australia. So they are responsible for anything that goes on because those accreditation bodies on the IAF are considered IAF MLA or MRA. And you'll see an email from Randy Dodery, but it shows equivalence of accreditation. So that means if there's another accreditation body that certifies a product and the product fails, it's on ANSI-ANAB. And don't let anybody kid you. We refused to go on. We depreciated his invitation. And at the time, he was a technical advisor for ANAB and also the treasurer and principal on the IAF tax report. On their website, it stated, and I want you to listen to this, business owners, and I want you to listen to Ms. Kavanaugh and also Mr. Zaplotsky, that this is what your certificate, whether it's laboratory or whether it's for aerospace or whether it's for medical, under the banner of these guys, ANSI-ANAB and their other cohorts, is your certificate accredited? If your certificate was issued by an ANAB accredited certification body, that means registrar, like BSI, BVQI, NQA, NSF, Perry Johnson, etc. The answer to this question is probably yes. And that's basically the problem with quality. Over here, we received an email from Randy because we asked him, under what regulated authority does ANAB operate? He wrote back, we are not in red. We are not operating under any governmental regulatory authority with the exception of being a legal entity. Well, guess what? Legal entity. You have sitting on there, ANSI, the Department of Homeland Security. They sat there, right there, the Department of Homeland Security, where you have a Mr. Phil Matheson at that time, 2018, and I show this, I know it's been 5 years, I think he's still sitting there. He was making $262,000 approximately on top of his federal salary. He is also considered the Executive Director, Office of Standards, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So Randy said they're not government, but they are. Do you see what's... Okay. The next one is NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is part of the Department of Commerce. And this can be a long story. I'm not going to leave it here. But as far as going deeper into this, I've gone deeper in other videos. But we have a Mr. Gordon Gillerman, who is the Director of Standards Coordination Office at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, making $120,000 on top of his federal salary. So when Randy wrote us that letter, that he said, and I will read this to you again, so that this gets in and soaks in, when he was the Vice President of ANAB, the chairman and principal in the IAF tax report incorporated in Delaware, he said, we are not operating under any governmental regulatory authority with the exception of being a legal entity. But let me just say this, business owners, my fellow citizens, these two federal agencies are getting paid by ANSI. So that gives them, how should we say, a little bit of in with the government? Isn't that a tender moment in a turbulent world? And here is the definition of a royalty payment. Unfortunately, the term royalty is not defined in the tax law. The regulations simply provide that whether a particular item of income is a royalty must be determined by the facts and circumstances of each case. So we don't know whether they're paying taxes on that money or not. And this is a good one. Is accreditation mandatory? Accreditation is voluntary. Accreditation by ANAB provides an exemplary level of credibility, integrity, and trust. We're going to go through this again. You have Boeing that has on their supplier portal that your third-party auditor for accreditation, ISO or AS9100, has got to be ANAB accredited. Their international equivalent, IAF, which could be any accreditation body, up to including Iran and Pakistan, because they are both IAF MLAs, multilateral agreement. and there's also multi-regional agreement organizations. So in essence, you can get Pakistan and Iran to come in and inspect Boeing. But did you hear what he said? Did you hear what the ANAB states on their website? That ANAB provides an exemplary level of credibility, integrity, and trust. Okay, so you got Boeing who fudges documentation, shoving ANAB down a supplier's throat. If you're not ANAB accredited, we're not going to use you, all this other crap. Yet you don't show their fudging documentation. Along with Kobe Steel, who is in trouble for fudging documentation, their steel supplier. You have Pfizer that skipped quality processes and standards. Does that show exemplary level of credibility and integrity and trust? Does it? Johnson & Johnson had to recall many COVID vaccines because of contamination, quality issues. Did that show? Okay, you have, again, Lockheed Martin, 801 ships, and they're still having quality issues. Does that show exemplary level of credibility? Not in my book. And they call it voluntary. Here's the IATF, the International Automotive Task Force, where you have Elon Musk. I think he's not IATF, but he had 1.1 million cars recalled, Teslas. They also burn, baby, burn. That's his theme song of some of the Teslas that come off the line there. Burn, baby, burn, because they have very bad problems, just like the e-bikes. The fact about it is, remember what he said? It's voluntary, but that says mandate, doesn't it? And by the way, I think Ford just had another recall on a lot of material. This is a mandate for the IAF that it has to be an accredited registrar that sits, or accreditation body that sits on ANAB, because it shows exemplary quality. ANAB, ANSI are also underwriters. This was on a website, but what solidifies this as underwriters, which means if anything happens within the system of a product, they are liable. If the F-35 is landing and the front landing gear shears off, that's a possible quality issue where ANAB should be brought in, and they're part of the lawsuit. It is. What do you think, Mr. Zaplowski? Forget about it. Anyway, here we go. You have this. This is a actual government contract, and it was done in 2018 after ANSI-ANAB, actually after Randy Doherty handed over leadership to the IAF, Communist Chinese National. So basically in this contract, this standard operating work order from the State Department, no less, they have invited Communist China into it. And I'm going to show you why. You take a look at this. This is the actual piece of contract here. And it says, ANSI-ANAB is an underwriter for the International Accreditation Forum. So our own government invited Communist China in. Isn't that a tender moment? And here's the pyramid. I'm not going to go through this. If you want a copy of it, I'll gladly send it to you. The thing about quality, though, and the thing about all this discussion is a special word that we've found and we utilize to tell about GMP, all these acronyms and processes of acronyms, robust and transparent. And, well, this is the word, obfuscation, the action of making something obscure, unclear, or unintelligible. They talk about impartiality, oversight. You're going to find out that it's not impartial. It's really dictated by corporations and federal agencies that sit on ANSI's board. And here goes voluntary. We know it's not voluntary. I just showed you it's not voluntary. Mandate and mandate. Showed you two examples. In 2015, there you go, you have Randy Doherty, the Vice President of ANAB, the Chairman of the IAF, and the Principal on the IAF Tax Form Incorporated in Delaware. He handed over leadership in 2015 to Zhao Jinwu, a communist Chinese national who was mandated by his country of origin to take data through the China National Intelligence Law, Article number 7. He at the time was also the chief executive of the China National Accreditation Services, which also certified in 2017 the laboratory in the Bio-Level 4 lab in Wuhan, China, that released, more than likely because we have a Miss Pamela Sale that's going to be up shortly, a laboratory specialist who's the Vice President of Accreditation of ANSI-ANAB, who stated under deposition, we've got no protocol. Unbelievably terrible. So this is one of the reasons why I did not join when Randy asked us in 2016. Would you join? Let me ask you, a communist national watching over an American company incorporated in Delaware? You gotta be freaking kidding me. Also, here's a congratulatory little saying that Randy wrote in the IAF 20th or 25th anniversary about how proud he is that Zhao Jinwu took over. The sad part, ladies and gentlemen, is this. In 2017, when Zhao Jinwu was down in Wuhan, China, issuing a certificate, we discovered on the Department of Homeland Security, Randy was being advertised as the vice president of ANAB for a special certification that was going to be issued through ANAB for the DHS. Okay, at that time, Randy sat on that board being advertised. A private concern. That's like having Walmart on the FBI. That's like having Walmart on the DHS. It's just, from what I've gathered over time, it is not correct. And what happened too is when I exposed a factor, they changed up the website real quick and they got Randy off. Here we have a special guest, Xi Jinping, who mandates Zhao Jinwu or any Chinese national to take our data through the China National Intelligence Law, Article number 7. There are 7 different registrars, more than that, actually 60, but we labeled the 7 that are the most prominent, and they sit on ANSI's board right over by these corporations and federal agencies that utilize them. These registrars also utilize ANAB accreditation. There is no oversight. ANSI and ANAB, at the time, 2015 and 21, sat on the IAF. Isn't that a tender moment? And in 2018, ANSI took over complete control over ANAB. And ANAB sits on ANSI's board. You have 10 different registrars in communist China that can issue an ANAB accredited certification, ladies and gentlemen. It's getting better, isn't it? A real tender moment. On top of it, as I told you on Boeing's supplier survey, portal, it states must be ANSI-ANAB or internationally equivalent. And these are, well, there's a lot more, but I want to show you these guys. This is the internationally equivalent that could come into Boeing, and don't let anybody tell you anything different. They are IAF MLAs, multilateral agreement organizations, Pakistan and Iran, and I don't say this to the people at all. The people are harmless, and it's the leaders we have to really blame for all this mess. And then you have the IAF. The IAF and ILAC, the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation in Australia, and the International Accreditation Forum Incorporated in Delaware, are sister organizations. They're sister organizations where Randy actually stated that they were sister organizations. We have all this data. We have it all. So far, the case is looking good, doesn't it, Mr. Zaplowski? This is an actual letter from Randy talking about how an IAF MLA, multilateral agreement, and a multilateral arrangement, IAF MLA and MRA, are equivalent in accreditation to ANAB. That means you have the China National Accreditation Services that is equivalent in accreditation, meaning that if they gave an ISO 9001 certificate or an ISO 17025 for laboratory, it is as if ANAB themselves gave the certificate, which means if they are underwriters, they take that responsibility. And here we go. Here is Zhao Jinwu in 2017 showing off his stuff, issuing a laboratory accreditation to the BioLevel 4 lab, which more than likely, after you hear Pamela Sale, you'll definitely concur that, yes, that laboratory more than likely let the virus out. At the time he was sitting there, he had been 2 years chairman of the IAF, while Randy was still the principal on the IAF tax report, 990, and he was also the chief executive of the China National Accreditation Services. In 2017, the second annual workshop in China, where you have actually probably a year or so ago, Rand Paul was inquisitioning Dr. Fauci at NIH. By the way, NIH sits on ANSI. All of them are. It's very incestuous. And he said to him, do you know anything about gain of function? And Fauci said, I don't know. Just like that. Anyway, I thought I was watching a cartoon. And here it is. Okay, gain of function, here it is. That's the first table of business. And if you read all these bullet points, they were prepping for some sort of worldwide pandemic. Here we go. We get the master of ceremonies out, Mr. Charles Lieber. Charles Lieber is a specialist in nanotechnologies, both biological and electronic. He ended up getting very nice awards from NIH, which sits on ANSI, and also the IEEE, which sits on ANSI, for his work in nanotechnology, both biological and electronic. He was part of the talent plan in communist China. He got a lot of money. What the Chinese do is they go around to the Ivy League schools and get the creme de la creme of intellect, because they find out that Americans, because of our liberal arts education, are more well-rounded. The Chinese, they get the job done, but they're very centralist. They are very concentrated, while we daydream a little bit too much. That's the problem. But they like it, so let them go with it. So he was the head of the chemistry department in Harvard. He was, of course, arrested. I think it was a set-up deal. When Harvard was asked, did they know anything about his talent plan? And they said, I don't know. I don't know why, because they're making a lot of money from China. We went on further, and we discovered after that nightmare that there's a lot of rejections in accredited laboratories. This is what I'm saying, Ms. Kavanaugh and Mr. Zablosky. In accredited laboratories, and by the way, when you see Ms. Pamela Sale, who's going to be coming up shortly, you're going to find out that whether it's a phlebotomy lab or they're testing electronics or whatever, there's no protocols. That's what she said. And she's a vice president. She should know. You have a report in 2011 that was sent out by Mr. Marvin Schechter, attorney. And maybe you know him, Mr. Zablosky. And he said a certificate from ASCLD-LAB is no more than a badge of honor, like most. We have many failures in laboratory, Ms. Kavanaugh and Mr. Zablosky, many failures. And I will emphasize this. It does not matter whether it's a phlebotomy lab, forensic lab, whether they're doing metrology testing or whatever. This is a problem and pervasive throughout anything that ANSI-ANAB touches, and those that are within the scope of all of this mess, International Accreditation Forum and in the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation. I did a video concerning A2LA and saying that they sat on ANSI's board. I got a little tiny note underneath it from a Miss Ashley Morton, who said that A2LA and ANSI are two separate accreditation bodies unto themselves. Actually, she's told me that. I thought ANSI was always a standard writer, and you discover that, no, she was correct. Because you have a Cargill company that sits on ANSI's board, that had a recall of 138,000 pounds of beef, back in September 2018. And the funniest thing is, on their certificate, their British Retail Consortium certificate, is the ANSI logo. And by the way, you have SurfSafe in New York, many of your restaurants, and it's rated F. So look it up. Actually, I'm going to show you it. Here's Ms. Pamela Sale now, the quality certification extraordinaire for laboratory. And she said this: whether you're testing in any laboratory, any type, she's using forensics for an example, but if this is the policy in forensics, it's the policy throughout. I've been in quality for 40 years. Yes, policy throughout. She said one of the issues is that there is no commonly agreed upon set of standards that forensic labs around the country have to follow. So that's forensic labs, bio-level 4 labs, phlebotomy labs, electrical testing laboratories, whatever it takes. Remember, one of the issues is that there is no commonly agreed upon set of standards around the country and the world. Instead, there are informal guidelines that labs can choose to follow or not. And the worst thing I want to tell you is that here's a certificate that was signed off by Pamela Sale, where she says that this certificate is worthless. That's basically what she said. Now we're going to bring Boeing out because I want to show you this nightmare. Here's Boeing. In 2002, Boeing basically said that if you are AS9100 certified, which is an aerospace ISO certificate, then you can just send us parts and we don't have to send any more inspection. I'm not going to read it to you. If you want, I will gladly send it to you. In 2009, the FAA seceded inspection, meaning they said, Boeing, if you want to sign off your aircraft, you want to build it, design it, go ahead. And they will use the excuse that we didn't have enough personnel. Unbelievable. Boeing sits on ANSI's board, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. And here is what I told you about the supplier portal. And I have pictures of it. It says, certification body is accredited for these quality management systems by ANSI-ANAB, National Accrediting Board, ANAB, or internationally equivalent, which could be Iran and Pakistan. The problem with this, and I'm talking about Laboratory 2, is that it seems like every organization that sits on ANSI, whether it is corporations or federal agencies, there's a serious problem. As a matter of fact, you have Christopher Wray from the FBI in 2022 stating under deposition in Congress, I wish they got me to do it for these bozos. Bozo is a quality term. You'll find out at the end of this that, yeah, it's bozo. So Christopher Wray said under deposition, he said this, and I quote, he said that China is a detriment to America, that TikTok is a Chinese company and it has a problem with cybersecurity issues. Yet the FBI sits on ANSI between 2015 and 21, and they got hacked. Their personnel, at least 30,000, one of the articles I remember, 30,000 identities with phone numbers, cell numbers, addresses, got hacked from the FBI. So you have that guy. You also have the factor, here it is. Here's some articles where Boeing fudged documentation. They sit on their quality. They sit on ANSI-ANAB. Oh, this is good. Pfizer sits on ANSI's board. You have Albert Bourla getting interviewed by Megan Terrell. I have that's going to be in a PR that's coming out. And I'm just saying this. You have Megan Terrell, MSNBC, talking to Albert Bourla, the CEO, veterinarian extraordinaire, because that's what he is educated in, as a veterinarian. So when they said to people that they took the injection, you're a bunch of sheep. Well, it's not too far from the truth. The guy at the head of the company is a veterinarian. On top of it, when asked if he took the injection, he said no, not yet. He's a 59-year-old man. A year or two before, the CDC had as a protocol that if you're 50 years old, you should get your vaccine because it'll keep you out of the hospital. Well, I guess he disregarded the CDC, okay? On top of that, he said, let me do his voice, I apologize. Megan, it was made in the sun. We have quality processes. It was made in the sun. It was made in the sun. Well, you call this made in the sun? I think it's made out of here you go. Pfizer skipped critical testing and cut corners on quality testing standards reveal. Nice. Now we're going to go to J&J. J&J too, they sit on ANSI right over by the FDA, CDC, you'll see. And here, take a look at that. J&J says batch of COVID vaccine failed quality check. Not clear how many doses were lost. Let me just say this too, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if I may. I was involved with medical. If it comes to medications, sometimes you can't really test it, okay? You can't test it in a lab. Sometimes you can catch it, sometimes you can't. What happens is the medication goes out and people start getting sick, up to including death. That's why they probably had a recall. You have the NIH sitting there. You have the CDC sitting there. As I said, the FDA. And for you people who go out to dinner all the time, here is SurfSafe. SurfSafe is certified by ANSI, another failure. It's rated F on the Better Business Bureau, and it's just unbelievable. I know you do have those cards, the New York State mental health and hygiene cards. I'm part of that, and I will say this. Honestly, that was a very good education. This is rated F, and restaurants demand it. Somebody's making a lot of cash. I don't know who, but I'm going to also show you this. UL, the UL company that you say should be the standard, the 2272. Ladies and gentlemen, they too sit on ANSI's board with Amazon, is also a member. And do you know what we call the IAF? It always fails, and ILAC is laboratory accreditation credible. I thank both of you for coming in here today, and this is what you will get from many people out in the quality community, the business owners, that Boeing forces ANSI-ANAB down their throat. You have like AOG Technics who fudged documentation. Well, what they were doing is they were just following Boeing's call. Boeing's the original, equipment manufacturer. They were just following that. Look, after 801 ships, you have Lockheed still producing crap. And also their LCS Littoral battleship ain't too good either. But this is what many business owners tell me. Pay to play. Isn't that a tender moment? I'm going to leave it here. I thank you. I am sorry for both of you for putting up with this. But I just want to let you know, an accredited laboratory is not that accredited. Okay? And Pamela Sale said that. And she's the accreditation guru. She is the vice president of accreditation. If she don't know, nobody does. And she said, there's no protocols. It's ad hoc. I guess they take a quarter out and flip it, heads or tails. I'm going to leave it here. The song that they use for these bikes, Burn Baby Burn. Because I'm telling you this because this is a fact. I've got over 40 years in quality. And you know something? As Thomas Paine said, when speaking the truth, it is many times like administering medication to the dead, and I hope those two are not dead. I really do. As far as not listening to this, I thank you. I am sorry for the length of this. 203-556-1493 or Daryl, Daryl, TQRS @yahoo.com. I thank you. And thank you again for coming in here, Laura and Mr. Zaplowski. I thank you.